We're so used to our wearables counting steps, tracking our sleep, but what if they could do more? What if they could actually communicate with us through the language of touch, of feeling? That's what we're diving into today, this idea of designing with emotion. Okay, let's start with something you've probably felt. I know I have. You're just sitting there, right? Minding your own business, and then you feel it, that little buzz in your pocket. So you grab your phone, but nothing. It's that classic phantom buzz, a little trick our brains have learned to play on us in this digital world. And it's not just some harmless little quirk. As one person in the research we're looking at today said, those constant phantom buzzes can make you feel genuinely stressed. That simple vibration has gotten all tangled up with the feeling of being overwhelmed. So, how did we get here? How did our relationship with tech get so emotionally complicated? Well, it's been a long time coming. I mean, think way back, like to the 1800s. If you were operating a manual loom, your whole body was in on the action. It was physical, it was rhythmic, your work was embodied. Now, jump to today. For so many of us, work is just tapping and swiping, moving symbols around on a screen. Our bodies have kind of been left out of the conversation. But now, a whole new generation of designers is trying to change that. They're working on bringing the body back into the picture with something called wearable haptic artifacts, or WHAs for short. Basically, these are smart textiles, clothes that are designed to talk to us through physical sensations, like vibrations or pressure, or even changes in temperature. Okay, but this whole idea brings up a really big question. If the goal is to create tech that feels, good or comforting or just interesting, how in the world do you design for a feeling? It's way harder than you'd think.
See, the way we normally approach designing wearables is super logical, right? You've got your technically led designs, which are all about performance, precision, making sure it works perfectly. Then there's the physiologically led stuff, which is focused on tracking data, like your heart rate. And finally, you have material-led design, which is all about exploring cool, new smart fabrics.
And look, all of those methods are great. They're fantastic for measuring stuff, but they don't really help you if you want to start with a purely subjective, personal feeling. We can analyze what's already there, but they don't give you a roadmap for creating a feeling from scratch. And that leaves this huge, huge gap in the design process. So the research we're diving into today, it was designed specifically to fill that gap. And this diagram really lays out the whole journey perfectly. First, you have to find the problem in all the existing work. Then you have to invent a new method, a new tool to solve it. And finally, you've got to position that new solution out in the real world by actually testing it with other designers. So to tackle this problem, the researcher didn't look to engineering textbooks. Nope, they turned to philosophy. The whole key was finding a totally new way to think about the relationship between us, our bodies, and the technology we use every day. And that new way of thinking has a pretty fancy name, post-phenomenology. But don't let the name scare you off. The core idea is actually really simple. It's that technology isn't just a neutral tool that we pick up and put down. It actively shapes how we experience and see the world around us. Think about it. A telescope doesn't just let you see Jupiter. It fundamentally changes your relationship with the night sky. Okay, so that sounds cool, but how does a big philosophical idea like that actually help a designer in the real world? Let's use a classic analogy to make it all click. All right, say hello to Heidegger's hammer. Imagine you're hammering a nail. Are you thinking, I am holding this object made of wood and metal? Of course not. The hammer just becomes an extension of your arm. It disappears into the task. Philosophers call this ready to hand. It's part of the experience. But what happens if the head of the hammer suddenly flies off? All of a sudden, you're looking at it as a thing, a broken object with properties like weight and splintered wood. It's no longer part of the action. It's present to hand, a separate object you're now very aware of.
And that right there is the big light bulb moment. The goal for great wearable tech is for it to feel ready to hand. It shouldn't be some gadget you're constantly noticing or fiddling with. The best tech should just disappear into the experience, becoming a totally seamless part of how you feel and interact with the world.
So armed with this new philosophy, the researcher went and developed something really practical, a way for designers to start thinking with their bodies right from the beginning of the process. And they called it the Sensational Toolkit. Now, this isn't a kit for building the final polished product. Think of it more like a library of sensations.
Inside, you've got all these different components that can create specific feelings on your body. There are inflatable elements to create pressure, thermoelectric modules for hot and cold, little motors for vibration, and even textiles with pins for a kind of prickly texture.
And the tools themselves are actually pretty simple. You've got a little coin vibration motor, just like the one that makes your phone buzz. This lets a designer play around with all kinds of different vibrations. Then you have an inflatable element that you can pump up with a syringe. It lets them explore what pressure feels like anywhere on the body, on your arm, your back, maybe your neck. And this, right here, is the most important part. The whole point of this toolkit is to give designers a new language, a language of touch. It lets them just play, experiment, and figure out how to articulate a very specific feeling first, long before they even imagine what the final product might look like or what problem it's supposed to solve. It's all about starting with the sensation itself. Okay, so a cool toolkit and a new philosophy? That's all great in theory, but does it actually work in practice? Well, the final step was to put all these ideas to the test in a real-world workshop with actual designers and students.
And here you can see that workshop in action. The participants were introduced to the toolkit, and then they were guided through a whole series of exercises. The goal was to get them out of their heads and into their bodies, to really focus on the physical sensations they were creating and experiencing.
And this is where things get really cool. The participants didn't just talk about the sensations, they actually mapped them out. So on the left, you can see their notes, where they're using words like tight, protective, or restrict. And then on the right, they translated those words into a visual language, drawing on a body map exactly where and how they felt each of those sensations.
And it turns out when you start with this deeply personal, body-first process, the designers started coming up with ideas that were just way more creative and emotionally powerful than what you typically get from a standard problem-solving approach. And this concept is the perfect example of that. This is the Scream support system. It's a wearable piece that comes with a pillow, and it allows the user to literally scream into it to release tension. The system muffles the sound, and then, in response, it triggers a cooling sensation that travels right up the user's chest and neck. You see, this wasn't about solving some technical problem. This was about creating a tool for emotional expression. As the creator said, the project was a personal reminder that just bottling up your emotions is unhealthy. It's a concept that came from a place of feeling, not just function. And all of this brings us to one final, pretty mind-bending thought. We're so used to technology that measures us, that listens to us, that watches us. But this research points toward a completely different kind of future. A future where our technology, even our clothes, might not just be on our bodies, but might actually be able to feel with us. Just think about that for a second. What would that world even be like?